Thirtysomething was a show that left an indelible mark on television. For 4 years and 85 episodes, millions of viewers watched as life's tiny dramas unfolded in groundbreaking ways. Recently, the Museum of Television and Radio invited the creators, Ed Zwick and Marshall Herskovitz, along with cast members Ken Olin, Mel Harris, Timothy Busfield, Melanie Mayron, Polly Draper, and on tape, Peter Horton and Patricia Wedig, to reminisce about the show with museum president Bob Baccia.
I'll be there.
I guess the question that the audience would like me to ask first is, are Michael and Elliot, Ed and Marshall?
I think you should ask the cast, because we clearly don't know.
I think Michael and Elliot and everybody, every character is Ed and Marshall, really, you know, on a show like this, because it's so inspired by these guys. I think you'd have to say everybody in one way or another, I would think.
We used to think that Michael represented who we thought we were, and Elliot represented the id.
Who we were afraid we were.
Let me ask you how the two of you met and how you came up with the idea of 30-something.
We met as students in film school and became friends. And there may even be latent in, you know, the story of our meeting and becoming friends, something that found its way in the show itself, which is the story of a friendship.
We had an overall deal at MGM Television.
That's right.
And the idea behind this deal was that I wanted to put a second story on my house, and they were going to pay me a guarantee, which was quite a new concept to me at that time. Our only obligation in this deal was to try to sell a television series, and it was the one thing we did not want to do. We wanted to make movies, miniseries, whatever, anything but a television series. And as the date of the network meeting approached, where we had to go in and pitch ideas for series, we came up with about 6. And
all of which we hated.
All bad. All bad.
Yeah.
And the day before the meeting, we sat in our office at MGM, and I looked at Ed and I said, what happens if we sell one of these? We'll have to make it. And we thought to ourselves, is there anything that we would like to do, that we would feel good about doing? And we started talking about the people we knew and the dramatic situations that we saw in the lives around us. And we realized there were a lot of stories to tell.
Couldn't we presume to say that in our own lives is the stuff of drama? And as Marshall was suggesting, someone was having trouble at work, someone's marriage was going through a crucible, someone's parents were sick, and the closer we looked, the more abundant it seemed. And we essentially walked into the network and said just that. Said, look closely, and that's what we want to talk about. You know, rather than talking about the cop, and the cop has 2 scenes at home where you see his marriage, we said, you know what? Forget the cop. Let's just talk about the marriage.
Well, this show is distinguished by incredibly strong characters. And I'd like to ask each of you if you'd talk a little bit about your character and what you liked about your character and how it developed over time. And Ken, would you start with yours?
No.
You can't remember that.
Yeah. I think that the character started out being the part of Ed and Marshall that was most idealistic about marriage and the most, I guess, idealistic about all of the possibilities that were there in front of him as he matured. And then I think, you know, as we began to deal more and more with business, Michael became a little harder and a little more ambitious, a little more driven. And he wore nicer clothes than Ed and Marshall wear, so I really like that part.
I remember one thing, really, which is that there was almost a kind of a subtitle that we had among ourselves, which in some sense it was about the sentimental education of Michael Stedman, though.
Yeah, I remember that.
Which is to say that you know, it's somebody who hadn't necessarily been in the world who then had to learn about the world.
Right.
Mel, talk about your character.
I mean, Hope was as an actress playing a character, she was an amazing education. And I think, to reiterate what Kenneth said, is that you start with something, and given the 4 years that we had to do this and the wonderful group of people, writers, actors, directors, who worked on it, the growth went in so many different places. And that, for me, was the wonderful part of the character to do. I mean, Hope, it depends who you talk to about Hope, what you think of her. Some people think she was this nice, sweet, you know, steadfast, good person for 4 years, and other people think she was just, how could she be like that to Michael, that she was this awful
Everybody thought she looked really good in her underwear.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Black ones. They were the black ones.
That was sort of a universal
Yeah.
So she had redeeming qualities then.
Yeah, that was certainly one of them.
Tim?
Boy, Elliot was so clearly a boy as drawn by these guys, you know. I'll say it's the best part I've ever had. You know, Elliot, the character was very... I remember I first went in and read for the part of Gary on the show. And then the guy said, you know, we like, his agent said, they like you got the voice of it, but go back in and read Elliot. And then I read Elliot and I thought, you know, I don't know anything about being single and unattached, but I can mess up a marriage. So let me play this guy because I think I have something to share. And it's a great part. Very lucky. Very appreciative of these guys.
Polly, talk about your character.
What I loved most about my character was that she tried so hard to do everything the right way, and she screwed up constantly. And she was such a complicated person. She always meant well and was continually doing things that people disapproved of. Usually it was Hope that disapproved, but which is why I end up spending more time with Melissa at the end, because she really let life happen to her, as she told us.
Melanie?
Melissa, I think Melissa was I identified a lot with Melissa. I mean, for me as an actor, I've never ever had the experience of growing with a character. I guess that's, you know, usually you have a job and it's over, you know, and this was 4 years, and I think for all of us, the arc of the character over the years was terrific. I think in the beginning she was very safe in her little world in Philadelphia, and towards the end of the series she was ready to move on. She had, it was like been there, done that, and she was sort of the duckling that got her wings or something.
The interesting thing about listening to these people talk about their characters is that we just took for granted how talented they were. That each one of them talked about how their characters grew, and we just assumed that they could handle that.
I think the smartest thing we did was to cast those actors who astonished us and who delighted us, that to somehow be willing to depart from our preconceptions. And I think in each character, as we cast them, we departed from the preconceptions. You may have written a description, and yet the minute that someone came in who so inhabited that voice, we just gave ourselves over. The remarkable part, as it evolved, was that by virtue of choosing these actors because of our sort of connection or attraction to them as people, how formidable they were and how rich their inner lives were became the godsend that gave us the life of the show, because we went into relationship with them and we mined their lives and we allowed them to join into an enterprise where they informed everything that we did. They became directors. They became real contributors, so that it was an ensemble in its truest sense.
You're fighting me right now! Nancy, you're fighting me right now! Can't you stop for 1 second? I mean, what is it? Why am I mean, I can't believe I'm this awful person, this evil person.
Ellie, I don't. I don't.
The therapy clip,
Oh, my
you know,
God.
I remember when we first, remember that Burbage, we were at the Burbage Theater and we had a rehearsal, right?
Oh, God. Oh,
And
yeah.
Patty and I slept off the side and just immediately started fighting. For some reason, we just saw that in these characters, and for whatever I had experienced in my first marriage, and whatever Patty was finding fault in Kenny with, or for whatever was going on, we...
Gotta be nice to Patty because she's not here.
It was there, yeah.
Oh, it's so hard.
But that was
I thought he was being.
so from us, and without any sense, I don't even remember how we did it. I look at it now and I think I don't know how we did it.
When I look at the clips, I have this very real-time sense of what happened. It's not just as if it were improvisational, but as if we were participating in the things that were happening, because we were trading so mercilessly on all of our lives. And I guess because our lives had become so insular in that we, you know, were able to look no further, but we needn't look any further because it was so available, it was so abundant what was happening among all these lives. And what happened, of course, is a very meta thing. It did become about many of the relationships as they would develop.
Is that the phrase personal filmmaking that you often
Very
refer
much.
to?
And personal filmmaking doesn't only suggest autobiographical filmmaking, it suggests passionate filmmaking. It suggests filmmaking that isn't targeted and that isn't cynical. It's about things you believe in, things you care about, things you're really willing to invest your heart and soul in.
Ken, talk a little bit about your relationship with Hope.
Yes, dear.
Michael's relationship with Hope.
As opposed to yours. She was a fantasy figure for me for many years.
Michael's relationship with Hope. I mean, you know, it's funny because you say, like, talk a little bit about it, but I mean, you know, that was like 4 years was about Michael's relationship to Hope and Michael's relationship to Melanie and Polly's character and Tim's. So it's like, it's hard because in terms of the show that was what the stuff was of the show. I mean, this show, you know, was so much about, it was conceived by a partnership of writers, so they have a marriage of their sorts. They each had very different marriages of their own that they were writing about, and they were writing for actors in terms of marriage. Both of us had marriages, and they were very different marriages at the time, and Tim had a number of marriages. Polly had also went through a couple of people during the time.
So much of what was in our lives ended up on screen for us and the writers and everybody. I remember this one moment in particular where, in Whose Forest Is This?, the episode I directed about the Elliot and Nancy's son having the nightmares. There's the most emotional part of the piece is Nancy trying to put Ethan to bed, and Elliot's just arrived out at the doors. They don't know he's there, and Ethan keeps saying, "Tell me the story, tell me the story." And so she tells him the story of when he was in her belly, how Elliot would lean down and say, "I love the baby," and then when the baby came out, when Ethan came out, and Elliot said that, Ethan looked up and smiled. Well, that's a story right out of Ken and Patty's life. I mean, that happened with their son, and over and over again that would happen, where you would just be talking about yourself, or you'd just be having a conversation with somebody, and suddenly it'd end up in a script. So the fact that Michael is unable to keep a secret and loves to gossip is perfect for Ken, you know.
It's no surprise to anyone that we are great devotees of many things therapeutic and psychoanalytic, and I think one of Freud's great contributions was the notion that within the development of each person's life are the recapitulation of great mythic themes.
Epic themes.
Epic themes. That the epic can exist in a normal life. That's something that's always fascinated me, and that's what we wanted to talk about. That within the small moments of life are really worlds.
And when the network bought the show, how much did you know in advance where you were going to take the storyline?
Nothing.
No, and we had some vague notions that Elliot and Nancy's marriage would fall apart, you know, that somebody would get sick.
We had been on vacation with the family, and we had gotten back, and we were going to start rehearsals for our third year on 30-something, and I was shopping for groceries in the grocery store and just happened to run into Marshall Herskovitz. And so I said, well, have you thought of something interesting for my character to do for this third year? And he said, well, yeah, we'll talk to you later about it, Patty. And I said, no, I want to know now. And he said, no, yeah, I think it's better we'll have this big conversation about it later. And I said, no, just tell me, Marshall. And he said, well, what do you think about cancer? And I mean, it was totally unexpected that we were going to go into a topic like that on the show. And he said, but the thing is if we do this, we want the character to go all the way and she'll die. So you won't be in the series. And he says, so you have to really, you know, be willing to commit to that. And for me, what has always been the most important thing is just to be really engaged with what I'm doing artistically. And this sounded like a phenomenal thing to explore and to spend the year doing, and it really didn't matter to me that it meant that I would be on the show a year less. But the truth is, when we started working on this subject matter, and it was so engaging, and the writers were so incredible with what they were giving me to do, and we started getting an enormous amount of fan mail from people who had cancer, and one of the things they kept asking and talking about is, please don't have her die. Give the symbol of hope, that there's possibility. And so that's when Marshall and Ed made the decision to have Peter's character die, because they still were very interested in exploring what that is like with a group of friends to have one of their contemporaries die. So, but doing that work on the cancer episodes was one of the most fulfilling things I've ever done. I loved working on that.
Inside 30-something.
You know, we didn't find that episode particularly risque or even very provocative. I think the sort of flack and the response that it engendered surprised us, actually.
We were very scared of the word issues. We never used that word when we were doing the show. We were trying to depict life, and sometimes in trying to be truthful, that created an issue with the network. You know, Richard Kramer wanted to write a script that told the truth about these two men. That immediately became an issue. It wasn't to us,
Yes,
though.
the fact that they found each other talking in bed was just the logical place for them to have that conversation. It wasn't designed so as to somehow exploitatively put them there.
And you guys were exploring your relationship at the time.
Yes. Well, that too.
It always evolved. That, you never knew what was going to.
And I remember Richard saying what he wanted was for it to be normal.
Huh. Right.
That's what truly was subversive.
Yeah.
And by the way, we had a huge fight with the network because in the script, the two men were supposed to kiss. And we had a couple of wonderful arguments. You know, we brought in Nazi Germany, and I mean, it became very, very rhetorical. But finally, in the end, it was Richard who said, you know what, what's subversive is seeing two men be normal in bed together. I don't need the kiss. And so we backed off from that.
When somebody takes on a capital letter, I think it's easy to guard against it, because then it's somehow polemical, and then you could say, oh, that's not what I believe in. But I think what we really intended in each of these characters was to go into a much deeper kind of politics, a very personal politics.
I think that's one of the strong characteristics of this program, that you were able, through the ensemble, to deal with life's issues. And maybe I could ask each of the actors to pick a moment in their characters for your life that had that poignancy. Melanie, would you start us?
A great storyline for Melissa, I think the third season, or I think was the younger boyfriend. And that gave us a great place to go, because it was everybody's judgment about, you know, she's with somebody 10 or 12 years younger, and then her own self-doubt going, what am I going to do? What future is this with this guy that's that much younger? I mean, you know, I want to be like Michael and Hope. I want to get married. I want to have a family. And is this realistic with him? He still has his oats to sow. He's still, you know, a young little bird that has to fly. And you know, Melissa dealing with the reality and the acceptance of that. So I remember that season was just terrific for all that it gave.
There was an episode that Kenny and I did that called Competition, Rob Cohen directed. And well, we got to a certain day, and MGM was not so free with the show that you might see with a lot of West Wings today. They didn't like the shows to run for, you know, shoot for 14, 16 hours. They wanted it in and out. And Rob Cohen came to Kenny and I and said, on a Tuesday, there's a 5-page scene. MGM's pulling the plug. We end this day in 24 minutes. 6 pages down. There's a 5-page scene on Friday. I want to shoot it right here. I want to shoot it right now, and I want to shoot it in 1. And Kenny and I looked at each other and said, okay.
I tried to hurt you, Elliot. I mean, that scares the hell out of me.
This is a nightmare. My friend is in physical pain. This is a modern hospital.
I had a lot of, I had such great stuff to do. So the first season, I think when we did the 2 episodes about my father dying, that was incredible. Then the episode that followed that was an episode that Ed directed, where I went home, and we dealt with things that were more about my life, my background, my parents' divorce and things. The business, when we lost the business, that was, those were cool episodes.
Yeah, yeah.
There was like Joe Doherty, one of the writers, said, plot like substance. You know, so
something happened.
Yeah.
Certainly for Hope, one of the cores was about feminism. You know, it was the height of the 80s. It was the height of feminism. People were like, how can you stay home and raise babies? How can your character do that? I, of course, was a working mother and not staying home raising babies. I was raising babies on the set, but people would say, how can you let your character do that? And to me, she was the epitome of feminism because she made that decision. She was very capable of holding down a job and very capable of being out in the world. But she, you know, along with her husband, they chose that she was going to stay home and give that to children. And to this day, people still say, you know, how could you represent that? And to me, she was absolutely what the core of feminism is about a woman making choices, which is what she was allowed to do.
There were things in other people's episodes that would touch me at various times of my life that would solve problems for me or have I was going through a divorce during the episode that Patty and Tim were doing about separation, and there were a lot of unusual feelings that came up personally for me working on a show that was so intimate that way. That's what made the show so spectacularly unusual, and that's why shrinks would recommend it to their patients to watch, and because they said this might help you solve certain problems. Did you see these two people going through it? You know, it was as good as group therapy watching the show.
This notion that you could break up the storytelling with different ways of looking at reality, and that there was something important in that there was something, as Ed always used to say, metronomic about the way television always told stories at the same rhythm in the same way from week to week. And we just like breaking it up in ways that might bring a different way of looking at what was going on. So, you know, we did one episode that was entirely an homage to Hitchcock.
See, Gary, there's nothing to be afraid of.
The last thing you want to do is commit to a relationship.
Like maybe he's afraid of sex, but keeps having affairs to make people think that he's not.
What do you want from me?
Love.
One of the things that Ed and Marshall did that was unusual was they used a vocabulary of film in the storytelling, which is not something that was being done on television. Television sort of had its own vocabulary of master, over, close up, out. So I think as much as it was, you know, metronomic stuff, you know, they have very, very convoluted theoretical approach to the work. What they both were, which was also unusual at the time, is that they were both film directors. And there were not shows up to that point that had been run by film directors. They were television writers and television directors, right. And so it was a very limited vocabulary. And they came in and they said, well, here's all the stuff that we like in movies. You know, the idea of doing a Rashomon episode, which was going to be our second episode, but was considered too risky at the time, where we told from 4 different points of view, that was from their vocabulary as filmmakers. Those things hadn't existed before. So, especially since we were also not telling things which had a lot of plot, if any, you know, that one of the things we were doing was they were trying to break up a certain contemplative self-examination with the payoff of interesting and exciting film innovations.
So what do you think?
These are good. These are very good.
No, of him. The whole truth and nothing but. Jeff? Oh, I really like him. He's, well, he's,
My mother would love him.
Locks.
polite. No, he's,
Solid.
funny. Oh, no. No,
No comment. Look, we're all of us too damn judgmental. Jeff is out there like the rest of us. He's hurting, feeling, struggling. What can I say? He's the biggest jerk I've ever met in my life.
The thing is, what do you think?
Well, talk a little bit about the writing process. What was one of the strengths of the show, obviously, is the writing.
I think the thing that distinguished it for us was it became an opportunity to reflect and to mouth off on any number of concerns, but it wasn't just a bully pulpit. It was an opportunity to really meditate with each other and to say, all right, what do I really feel? Let me look deeply inside. Let me honestly, or at least up the octane of truth on any given subject, and presume that what I think or what I care about might be interesting enough to a lot of other people.
We tried to make each episode a meditation upon a theme. You know, so there was an episode called Success, where they lose their business, and it was about all sorts of different failures and what our dreams are of success.
Well, a lot of people forget there was a lot of comedy in your shows, and what I'd like to ask is each of the actors to give a moment that they remember where there was a comic moment for your character. Tim, you want to?
You know, there's so many. I do remember in the Rashomon episode how fun it was to play Elliot's interpretation of not flirting. When clearly the girls were saying, he was flirting, Hope's going, he was flirting with that waitress. And then in Elliot's version, he's just so innocent and so dumb. We would have so much fun. Patty and I would laugh in the middle of those cancer scenes. The women writers would take the IQ of Elliot and drop it right And it was so fun. It was so fun to play, because there's nothing more fun than a dumb guy that thinks he's smart. And the guys would paint it a little higher.
My character got a lot of comedy to do as well. And there were, I mean, I remember Beat the Biological Clock, which was a game show that was like brilliant. I mean, we had a set with sperm flying behind me. And
also, the one that Scott directed where you were going to the video dating service.
That was my favorite.
Oh,
You guys couldn't
Mr. Right.
That was my favorite moment.
Hi. Oh, is this on?
Oh, no. We'll just talk a little bit first, and then I'll turn the camera on, okay?
Sure. On or off?
Well,
on is better. Off is better? Hi. Wait. On is more professional.
Either way.
Well, I could just throw it on my shoulder.
Now, look, I'm just going to ask you a few questions.
Okay.
You know, just relax and
I'm
try to have
relaxed.
fun with it.
I am. I'm relaxed. Will you excuse me a minute?
Yeah.
I mean, look at the kid.
Sure. It's all coming back to you now, isn't it?
Ellen?
I remember the phone message of, we can't answer, Nancy has cancer. I do remember getting to do that. That was in one of the episodes.
It's interesting where one finds humor, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think my favorite day on the whole 4 years is when we did that 76ers fantasy thing down at the Forum.
Every boy's fantasy.
Give a quick pitch. Weiss comes off. Elliott's coming up top. Hit Elliott. Charlie right there. Charlie's got his man one-on-one.
Celtics lead 110-109. 13 ticks of the clock left. It comes down to this. The Celtics by one. Jaminski to inbound. G got it from Ojic. Maurice wheels it up top. Weston starts to drive. Double. Kicks it back to Barkley. Barkley trapped just right of the circle. Looks and looks. 5 seconds left. Finds Stedman. Stedman dribble drive to the hole. Stedman in the air. He jams and the Sixers win. The Sixers beat the Celtics 111-110 at the buzzer on a jam by Michael Stedman. The Sixers advance in the playoffs, and next up the Los Angeles Lakers. But more importantly, they have defeated the Celtics on a spectacular drive by Stedman.
Did Jimmy run the play for you? Well, no, the play was supposed to come to Charles, and then Charles got boxed in, and he dropped the ball off to me. I'm just happy, you know, lane was open, I did my job.
Timmy and I went down to, what was it?
I had to beg to get in.
It was the Forum.
It was the Forum, yeah.
And we were warming up, and all the Sixers were there, and along the baseline there were like 50 photographers because it was Barkley, and it was this huge deal. So we were warming up, you know, and so I was there, and they said, "Okay, Ken, you know, let's just do some layups and stuff." And I went to do this layup, and as I went up, I literally my feet went straight out, and I landed flat on my back. And I mean, all I could see was all these cameras, all these going. On my back, and Timmy looked at. I mean, I didn't slip. I just literally went up, and I was a decent.
It was physically impossible.
And I'm a decent athlete. It was just bizarre. And Timmy went, "That was an act of God, man." That had to be an act of God.
I had to beg to get into that scene because they had not put me in the white script, and I went to the guy's office, go in there and say, "Guys, come on. I got to play in the Sixers thing." And they looked at each other and went, "Okay,
said, you're right."
You're right." They put me in. I tried to justify it, but they threw me a bone. It was only out of compassion.
The thing that was so funny is people would be so familiar with the show, and when they would see me, I don't know if it was just me particularly or all the characters, and people would come up to me all the time and not necessarily right away know where they knew me from, but knew that they had some intimate relationship with me. They would like, "Oh, did we go to camp together?" or how do I know you? Were we in elementary school together? I mean, I know you. I know. I mean, are you my sister? I mean, it was pretty funny, and that still happens. That just happened just the other day, where someone was absolutely certain that I was some childhood friend of theirs, and I said, "Well, you know, I think it might be from," and then they get, you know, this television show, and then they get all embarrassed, like, "Oh, I'm sorry." I said, No, it's okay. I like it. I mean, I like that we came into people's homes and that they felt like they had a real relationship with us.
Intentionally or otherwise, what Gary became, to a degree, was a court jester in a fairly serious court. You had people who were taking their lives very seriously, and in would come this guy who wasn't. And it provided a wonderful balance to the show. And consequently also a wonderful tragedy that he would be the one to die. When Ed and I first talked about me doing the show, one of the things I forgot to mention was, he said, "It'll never go. If it goes for 6, you can direct one of the first 6. If for some reason it goes for 4 years, we'll kill you off after the 4th year." And that was our deal. So it came time to kill me off. And you know, I was sort of expecting this, and this is really where they're brilliant, where Ed and Marshall are brilliant. I sort of expected a great death scene. I was going to get, you know, in a car accident. I could see myself, you know, laid out over the hood, and the crashes, and the, you know. And their take on it was so much more profound, which is experiencing the death of a friend the way you experience it, which is you get a phone call.
4 years, 85 episodes, and the show ends abruptly. Millions of fans think that you really should have a reunion show. Do you feel that the show is complete?
Boy.
We were complete. How about that?
Mm-hmm.
We felt that we had done the best we could, and if we were to go another season, it would not be good. And that was something we didn't want to face.
I think we were tired because we were drawing from stuff that was very deep and very personal. I think we felt exhausted in a very particular kind of way. And I think we wanted to challenge ourselves in different ways creatively as we've gone on to do. I'd never had the impulse to do a reunion show until moments like this, sitting here and feeling these feelings with these people. You know, that would be the only reason to do it.
A 40 share wouldn't have any impact. It wouldn't mean anything to you, I guess.
Well, one of the things that one does feel in this room is that it is kind of a family. It is an ensemble. You all seem very much to like each other. And I'd like to ask each of you to reflect a bit on what this show has meant to you and how it fits into your career.
But what I remember most are everyone who was involved with the show, but particularly the 7 actors and these 2 gentlemen who are sitting here, because it became almost another kind of family. in terms of how we supported each other. Now, it doesn't mean we didn't have our moments. I remember having a huge argument with Ed down the streets of Pasadena in one of our early episodes. But we were very early, yeah. But we were always there for each other, and we could always count on each other. And what I brought away emotionally and intellectually and even physically in many ways was what was really special to me about that time.
You know, I always relate, or often relate things to sports, but you know, we were a part of a championship team for 4 years. We were it, and we were the best show on TV and awarded that. We felt we were, in our time, in our chunk, we were all stars. And that doesn't happen to a lot of actors in their life, that they can be a part of such an ensemble. I mean, we went from you know, everybody blossomed. Everybody took off. These guys were on fire. There was instincts happening. We talked about Patrick Norris's costumes in the room were great. The art direction on the show was great. Brandy Alexander. Everybody did great work. The editors were at their best. Every element of the show was just magically hitting its stride, like you would look at a World Series team. You know, everybody played to their fullest potential. You know, it was almost out of our control. It was almost as if the show came through us.
The most fascinating lesson that I learned throughout the 4 years and since the 4 years that I was on it was how easy it is to act when the writing is that good and the other actors are that good and the directing is that good, and how much all the elements contribute to making something work.
I mean, in Ed and Marshall, you know, you saw me in New York, and remember we talked about girlfriends, and I'm going to get emotional, but it changed my life, and I'm ever indebted. I loved doing it. I really did, as an actor and as a human being. And I feel privileged to have had the opportunity to share my work in a way that I've never, ever been able to do.
Ken?
I don't feel that way.
Follow that one, huh? Go ahead, follow that, Kenny.
Well, I think it's like Ed was saying, you know, I was certainly, I was tired. It was a long time to do the same person and to go to that well. It was very similar for me as it was to them. I'd had enough. Now, what I didn't know, and in that way, what saddens me the most is I didn't know that experience, the experience of working with all these people that I love, and that it was so fervent, and I didn't know how rare that was, and I didn't know that would never happen again, that I would go on to work on things that were enormously creative and enormously fulfilling and continue to, but the experience of a true ensemble, emotionally and creatively, a real family, and work that you could look back on, you know, 10 years later and go, man, that was so good, some of that was so good, and that you'll have once, because you only grow up in that once.
Exactly.
Well, if I can bring this to a close, we're often asked what makes a successful television program, and it begins with a good idea. It's great writing. It's writers who are not afraid to take a chance, that touch the human condition, that inspires the actors to give their best performances. And then there's that other element called chemistry. And I think if we've seen nothing else here today, it's the chemistry that all of you have with each other that I think brought this show that height that it achieved, and the outstanding quality that it has. I want to thank all of you for being here. This has been very enjoyable.
It was fun.
We're always happy for a chance to see each other.
Except Patty and Peter, they really didn't have that chemistry, did they?
No.
They really didn't have it, did they?
Was Peter in 30-something?
He was in it, but he died early on. Something happened to him. I can't remember. Did he die in real life or?